Jeff, you going or coming today? You're muted.
Yeah, I'm on my way home from being stuck in the Long Island Railroad East River Tunnel for a while.
Also put the video on.
Mhm.
Very
All right, is that better?
loud. Can you hear us?
Hi, Michael.
Hello.
How's it going?
Hi, Michael.
Hello.
And who was that, Jeff?
I'm on.
Jackson. But since this is broadcasting and we haven't started just yet, maybe I can finish saying something. I'm gonna mute now and then, Michael, we can fill you in a second so it doesn't go across.
We can hear you, but it sounds like you're speaking, but it's sort of a diffused sound. It's not really clear. I think you're on mute now.
Yeah, you're muted, Barbara.
Yeah, Jeff, they're muting us on purpose. They're talking
Okay.
about something, so. And I have a killer migraine, so I did not go in today. How long were you trapped there for?
Oh, about 10, 15 minutes.
Oh, okay, that's not too bad.
Not too bad, but it's put me off from where I thought I'd be for this call.
Sure.
Hmm. Hmm.
Jeff on Josh's line.
Okay. I don't know, but we can find out if, gallery view?
Yeah, maybe just to see who's in here.
No, that's not the right one.
Josh, I did talk with him today. Let me check if Sue's in.
Okay. All right, so you want me to have a gallery view? I'll let you do it. That's okay. Oh,
It didn't happen. Oh, there we go.
okay, there we
Yeah,
go.
they hit it hard.
Okay, and are we muted now?
No, you can hear us,
We,
Mike?
we can hear you.
Okay, great. All right, well, good evening, everyone. It is 6:36, and this is our City of Kingston Redistricting Subcommittee meeting tonight. We have in attendance Alderwoman Barbara Hill, who is our chair of the subcommittee, myself, Rita Worthington. We have Corporation Counsel Barbara Graves Polgar, and we also have Assistant Court Counsel Jonathan Clark. We have Alderman Michael Olivier, something like that, right? And we also have Jeff Weiss, and they are joining us virtually. So we are here to talk about the 3 maps that was posted on Engage Kingston. Like, you have all of your maps in front of you? Okay.
Yeah, I'm waiting for them to load. It's taking a really long time, but
Okay, well, so far, well, we've done the date, set the timeline. We had a public hearing. We reviewed the comments that came in. We got preliminary maps based on those, the census data. And you guys got a chance to read all of the comments? Barbara, you have?
Yeah, I'll summarize them when we get to that point, but we really haven't reviewed them together. This is the first time.
As a committee.
Yeah, I haven't really let you all know what I'm receiving through Engage Kingston and from people that know the chair. They think, they'll directly contact me.
Okay, so I guess our job here tonight is just to talk about the plans, how we're gonna move forward with what we have in front of us. All right, and please jump in anytime. Michael, please jump in anytime
Absolutely.
as far as your thoughts and what you think we should be doing.
sounds good.
So, as far as the 3 maps are concerned, though, I guess my question is, what do you all think about these? Do you think that we are going to need further maps?
I think the more maps we have, the more confusing it's going to get. We asked to have, I think, Plan C just to show, like I guess I don't want to say the true numbers, but, we asked for the most drastic breakdown, and that's what we got with Plan C. I think the more maps we introduce, the more confusing it's going to get for everyone, including ourselves. It's hard enough to try and explain maps A, B, and C to people. We keep throwing more maps in there. Of my opinion, I think it's just going to confuse, and inevitably confusion leads to anger.
Right.
I think that's an accurate assessment.
Thank you.
Right. Yeah, I mean, honestly, I would like to work with what we have here. Barbara?
Yeah. I think, if you look at it, I think when I was talking to the other Barbara earlier today, Corp Counsel, that, Plan A is, keeping the words as the same, mostly the same. I guess the word is, just keeping to some of the tenets that we have to go by. Then Plan C is more deferential to seeing what we could achieve using more, maybe using the census data to look at communities of interest, and I'll have a better phrase for it later, what Plan C represents, and Plan B is something in between. So I think we've covered it here. So I'm in agreement with that. And then I think something else that would inform whether we need another set of maps or whatever would be the comments. So far, they're either, no one's like, oh, Plan B. They're mostly Plan A because they don't want a lot of change, and there's been so much change with the Assembly, the Senate, now the legislative districts. So, and plus, some people see, is it okay to go into some of the comments now? Do you think this is an appropriate time?
I do. Yeah, I agree.
Okay. Let's see if I collect my thoughts. Right, they either want to see it remain mostly the same. They already see that being in that ward is sort of a community of interest because they're used to it. being that way. The deeper thinkers, like maybe former aldermen or people that really may have worked on the last census back in the, but they thought Plan C was cool because it really represented some of what they knew about the city, but in looking at their own specific wards, it was interesting how they applied the principles of redistricting and so that was of interest. And I don't know if you want those specific comments. I did print them all out here.
Can I ask you a question?
Yeah, go ahead.
I'm just wondering if maybe in summarizing the comments, you can shed some light on the geographic distribution or even the volume of comments that have come in thus far, because I think that's useful in evaluating some of what people have shared.
Okay, yeah, not a lot of comments. Maybe 2 via text, which they were no change. So there may be about 8 who would not want to see much change. The people that looked at Plan C, like Plan C, maybe 2 people. But
Plan
a
C?
Substantial, yes.
A substantial change.
Yes, but they gave, a good couple sentences about the rationale, which was informative to see how constituents or others in the community would look at the maps. So it just, for me, it was very informative to look at them and say, oh, let me go back to that paragraph so-and-so. So it's about 8 Plan A.
See if they drop something.
And 2 for Plan
Thank you.
C, nobody on Plan B.
So 2 on Plan C, because they liked that it was more reflective of the demographics. That's
They felt they would be more represented.
okay.
Both of them were clear about that. And they are both people that also know the city, has, served. And so that was of interest. I think there were a couple comments from people about keeping their neighborhoods together. Some of that was already in existence. So I don't know, because there was something they saw as splitting a neighborhood for the past 10 years, they were using this opportunity to say, hey, can we do something about Ward 8? So that was another very specific comment.
Okay.
So if I may, I do have a question about that. And Barbara, BGP, I don't know if this is something we can actually answer, but we avoided it last time, but I've gotten a lot of, complaints from constituents about, the line, and how do we as aldermen go about that with, I know Josh is on the line on with us now, but how would we go about that? Like, addressing or quote unquote fighting for trying to get those lines back. Like, for example, in Ward 7, it's Abbey Street for me. I've had a ton of complaints from constituents on Abbey Street that are not happy that they would not be in 7 anymore, that they would be in 6.
I'm curious about the content of the unhappiness. But before I get to that, your question to me was, how do you address that? Is that boundary the same on all 3 options?
Yeah, all 3 options, Abbey Street is gone.
Michael, can you get these? See, I've been encouraging people to put this in writing, the comments, because then we know, how many people, maybe how they feel about it or look at their community. I think it's helpful to have things in writing, either through the engagement page, which might be, too many hoops to go through, but at least to you and then CC to me. Anybody, what do you think about that, Rita? I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, it makes sense to have it in writing.
I think that's helpful for figuring out the what might need to be done, but your question, I think was a more technical one. Which
Yeah, 'cause-
requires looking at this and saying, okay, well, how many
Okay,
individual, what population change would have to, if everybody agreed that that's where the boundary had to be redrawn on one of these maps, where else would you have to sort of compensate for that change? And that's where Josh could come in and say, well, if we moved this line over here, then we'd have to compensate with this other line on the other side.
Yeah, because I did bring it up last meeting and then it kind of got pushed to the side because we were talking more like, what we're doing for the meeting. So I'm just bringing it up again because I still get those phone calls.
So do you, oh, sorry, Josh is here.
Yeah, so I'm looking at Abbey Street and it's hang on.
No, of course.
I'm still still trying to, okay, so yeah, there's 2 census blocks there that would be basically what we'd have to do is we'd have to find a swap, right? The issue with between 6 and 7 is that the north sort of the northeast side of District 6 has like a couple large census blocks, so they're not a one-to-one swap. But basically, in order to not have Abbey Street go into 6, we have to find something else from 6 to put into 7.
Gotcha.
And so what we're really fighting against there is the plus or minus 67 people threshold.
Mhm.
So it may be possible to do something. It doesn't look like it can be done on the sort of northeastern portion. So it might be, instead of having those 2 blocks, at the northwestern portion there, be in there, maybe if like 2 blocks north of that could be included in 6 instead, you could do that swap. Then those people are probably going to be unhappy as well. So, unfortunately, there's no wiggle room on the north, sort of northwestern portion of 7 and the northeastern portion of 6, because the census block there is so big that if we swapped that into 7, it's possible. What might be possible is, looking at it now, is there seems to be like a sort of corner coming where East Chester Street kind of cuts west before going up out of the city line. There
Mhm.
seems to be like a few census blocks in there that might be able to be included in 6 and swapped out. So that would be a possibility. I don't know how the people in those would feel about being included in 6.
So.
Yeah, I don't have an answer for that. I just know, like I said, there's a lot of people on Abbey Street who have my number and who utilize it, and they have been calling me.
Yeah.
So I just want to make sure we don't lose the point that Josh just made in response.
Yeah.
I know that this is being recorded on YouTube, but that specific option, Josh, that you just kind of threw out there, would that apply to all 3 of the maps or just one of them?
Well, I mean, as a general principle, if people want to make changes, then it has to fall within the population deviation. And with a population deviation this tight, what it's mostly going to mean is that if something needs to get swapped, then something else needs to get swapped. And sometimes it's multiple where you end up switching.
Right, but you just proposed a specific swap that
I said that might be possible. Yes, if that is possible in one, it should be possible in all. I don't know that it is possible though, because I don't have the census block populations there. What I was looking for is like geographic size of census blocks to kind of give me a rough estimate there. I mean, the math would have to work, but that would be a possibility.
So Mike, did you take a note of that specific one? Because if we're going to go back and try to refine, I just don't want that suggestion. Whether it's possible or not, we don't know, but I don't want to get lost in the shuffle as we try to move forward with maybe tweaking the existing maps.
So I was just saying that if let's go to, since 4 is made, we move a street out of 4, that means that we possibly would have to do that with other wards as well, just to make sure that it remains equitable.
So that specific, you said there were 2 or 3 blocks at the north end of which ward that could maybe compensate for the Abbey Street move?
Six. Yeah, hang on for 1 second. I think I can probably. I gotta look. I'm just like going back between Google Maps and because I'm trying to find the street names because they're not labeled entirely on the map here. So let me. It's on the. So it's there's a section of. Yeah, so it'd be like Kingston Terrace, Lisa Lane, and Tammany Street. That like sort of area right in there. I don't know what the populations look like, but you know, it might be possible to sort of swap that area for the Abbey Street blocks or one of the blocks there. You know, you'd probably want to do both though, so that you have both sides of Abbey Street, right?
Mhm.
Yeah. So you're looking at swapping those 2 blocks. I don't have the mapping software in front of me because I'm not at my office at work. So I can't tell you what the populations of each one of those blocks are. But there might be a possibility to do some kind of swap out with those and put those into 6 in order to keep Abbey Street into 7.
Okay. So I guess my next question, because this one was really relevant towards myself, as a committee, should we reach out to the other aldermen or have them speak to us about, you know, hey, you've looked at the map, your constituents have looked at the maps while we're in the you know, maybe redrawing phase. Have you had any constituents really reach out that are upset about this particular thing? That way, Josh kind of has, okay, you know, I've heard this from 1, this from 2, all the way to through 9. And that way we're not, you know, like Josh redoes everything for me. And then Tony's like, oh, hey, what about me? You know what I mean? So he's not spending the next year.
Yeah, since you're not an independent commission, but you're basically incumbents drawing plans pursuant to the city charter, I don't see any legal problems in doing that. And it also would deal with any kind of favoritism issues that could be raised later.
Does anyone else have a opinion on that?
I'm sorry, I didn't catch everything Jeff said.
So I don't know if we want to go too far down the road of like specific litigation concerns, but I think Jeff's general view was that it's a good idea to get broad feedback from the aldermen at this time.
Okay.
Yeah. Something to the level of an Abbey Street in other districts.
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, and the one thing to kind of keep in mind there is like the possible solutions may end up being worse than the original, you know, sort of problem, but it is worth exploring. So I think maybe, you know, sort of accumulating a list from all of the aldermen of things that are, you know, the worst, you know, sort of, you know, because there's really so little wiggle room with everything here that it's very difficult to sort of make. Normally it'd be easy to make accommodations because you can kind of swap a block in and you don't have to swap anything out because you have enough deviation to play with. In this particular redistricting, that's not going to be the case just because the deviation is so ridiculously tight.
You might want to limit any comments from your colleagues to 1 or 2, literally, not more than that.
I'm sorry, can you repeat that, Jeff?
Yeah, you might want to limit any suggestions from your colleagues to 1 or 2 changes at most, and only if they really make or break. And be sure to tell them that it might not be possible because of the population and geographic constraints that we have to work with.
And then I guess the solutions would need to be presented as well, because like, for instance, in this Abbey Street, you know, sort of thing, you know, you would probably want to collaborate with the 6th Ward alderman with regards to what's getting swapped where, so that that swap doesn't end up on their list, and you know, et cetera.
So, question. Maybe you can, I'm just trying to phrase it right. So when we talk about making sure that all of the wards are equitable, right? So when we're talking about equitable distribution, just explain that to me. Are we talking about just the population? Are we talking about diversity? Are we talking about economics? Who can answer that question for me? Because that might give me a better idea of how I want my specific ward to look. Because honestly, I have not gotten a lot of comments at all about how the lines are going to be drawn in Ward 4. Primarily, I believe it's because, I think I said this at the last meeting, that it's just difficult to understand. And, you know, what are we really basing it on other than this is something that we have to do because the state's telling us that we have to do?
Maybe I can take a first stab because I am not one of the experts, and so I won't go too granular, and then they can fill in some more detail. But as a top line issue, we have to try to have as close to the same number of people in each ward as possible. So
Right.
that's kind of top line.
That's the broad answer.
The count. And then there are some other requirements about on the geographic side, the way that these lines have to be drawn, or the districts have to be drawn, without going into the technical terms, in a reasonable and lawfully reasonable fashion. And then I think our experts can fill in some more content there. Like you can't grab some people from here and grab people from there and cross a river. I mean, not about that, but
Right.
you know, they have to be reasonably drawn from a geographic perspective, but they have to be more or less equal in population. And then we have these other more complicated considerations about the communities of interest. What do they look like? Are we breaking up folks who, because of how they live in the community, should not be broken up? Or the language that people speak, or you know, some other community population-driven factor that seems like a natural coalescing of a community? Is it unnatural to break that up, or will it impede the ability of that group to have a meaningful voice in government in some fashion? So now I turn it over to the technical people.
Yeah, that was excellent. I don't really need to add much more to that because that lays out population equality. Just maybe add the concern about minority voting rights. But outside of that, the districts need to be relatively compact. They need to be contiguous and follow community boundaries as best as you can objectively identify them, or even subjectively, and try to put some teeth into it in terms of communities that feed into a school, or that serve a church, or a community center, things like that.
Right.
So one of the complicated issues, which is that kind of third level point that I think we are all grappling with a bit more than say just the raw numbers, these communities of interest issues. Everyone here is committed to being as fair and representative as possible. And there are ways that you can manipulate those communities of interest, say, if you were not trying to be as fair and equal as possible. So you could sort of cram everybody who might have an aligned interest or language group or ethnicity or racial group into one area. And then those folks won't have an opportunity to really elect citywide in the same way.
Right.
Or you could break up those groups by the same token so that so few of them were in each of the districts that they could never truly coalesce. And so there's an art to that that Josh maybe can share some more insight into, but that's a much harder issue to grapple with.
And don't get too overdrawn on it that it's bigger than you think it is. Just be practical, be comfortable with what you think communities are. Don't go out of your way to concoct something that isn't.
Yeah.
But the other thing is, which is one of the points that I think Barbara's comments were hinting at, that we have gotten some comments, but at the first hearing, there weren't a lot of speakers.
Right.
And to really think about this third level issue that is really complicated and sensitive, it requires broad community input.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, that outreach to the community is key. How to, almost feeling like I gotta go around with a set of maps and sit with people and show them and explain it, because, it's a learning curve. It's been a learning curve for me. I think that's what you were saying earlier, Rita, it's people may have looked at it, but I have to say, a few people say, well, what do you think? Trying to get me to say what I think, and I'm saying, no, I want to know from you, and, please take a look, and then trying. So it is, a labor intensive process, I think, to really get at what people are thinking. So I've been trying to think of who are the key people in the district who maybe have, an award that may have some, general sense of that word, and they could take a look at the maps, but.
Also, keep in mind that when you have a final map before a vote, or actually your last public hearing, when you're down to one map proposal, you'll get the most comments then. And some of them might be very marked comments that you hadn't heard already, but just be prepared for that. That's what usually happens. As the gates close, the comments increase.
So Jeff, it sounds like you're suggesting that the subcommittee should start to winnow down from 3 to 1. Well, it sounds like the subcommittee is a couple of things. One, canvass the other aldermen for specific problems or concerns as to particular streets or aspects of their ward. And then number 2, work towards winnowing down towards one proposed map before the next public hearing. I don't know, Jeff.
I mean, given that you're on a tight time frame, it's probably best to start that process as soon after the new year, as possible, so that you could deal with any kind of last minute issues that you hadn't anticipated. Still have time to get the job done, but you've got only just a few weeks. So decision making, the earlier you can come down to a decision, I think the more last minute comment you can deal with.
I think, this first idea or suggestion or what we're going to do is, if we're going to ask aldermen for 1 or 2 changes they see most needed in the maps, I mean, it would be hard to say, okay, look at map A, look at the map plan B, look at plan C. Each one might have 1 or 2 changes to it. So the idea of winnowing needs to go on sort of at the same time as getting feedback. It's a little.
Sorry. What you might do is just ask them, based on your current districts, what do you have, if you could, this is not anywhere near a promise, but if you had to keep something that you just cannot give up, what are those areas? And those areas may very well be in the 3 draft maps now, but at least you're not giving them more of a selection to come back and forth and back and forth.
Right. Thank you very much. That was very simple.
Yeah. I am walking to my car right now from the train, so I'll be back on video as soon as I can get myself together on this.
Okay.
Maybe just mute yourself, Jeff, until you're ready to come back on.
Okay. Is there noise in my background?
A little bit.
Okay, I'll mute.
So can I ask one question of Josh? Because the recommendation that Jeff just gave, will that work across all 3 options?
No. Well, yes and no. So I would recommend an alderman saying that they absolutely have to keep something that's like in the center of their district. If we're going for the two versions that change the least or the least change map, then that's not very helpful because that area is in no danger of being moved anywhere. So it'd be like what areas of your district that borders another district are very, you know what I'm saying on that? Particularly for the least change and the A and B maps. That's particularly useful because there aren't major changes there, and the only places that are in danger of getting changed are on the borders. I think also maybe soliciting some feedback as to which of those plans in general, they would prefer as well might inform the discussion of and the winnowing, as it were.
So that feels like it begs a follow-up question that maybe aligns with something Barbara Hill just said earlier. I mean, asking the current alder persons is one thing, but it actually is asking the people who live in particular communities, or just trying to get a little bit more of that, and figuring out what the appetite is for a more comprehensive refashioning of the ward boundaries. Not just from a small group that might have an interest in the way they are now, but a broader swath of the community.
I was following up until the end.
You would honestly, you would need both, right? Because even if there is a large appetite in the city for massive change, ultimately the aldermen are going to be the people voting on it.
That's true.
So, you really need buy-in from both if you want to make larger changes.
So I have an example, let's say, of Main Street, right, which I currently, they're in my ward.
Mhm.
Okay. I just realized that tonight because one of the comments was from somebody so a few people have been saying they want to see Main Street, both sides of the street. That's a community. And right now that exists. In two of the plans, it doesn't, and then it's back and it's okay in another one, right? So I'm just mentioning it as an example because if you push, it's hard to push Main Street to include both sides of it. That really
Yes, that's very difficult.
That was, I'll speak as the alderwoman in Ward 1, it would be one of the boundaries I would say something about.
So essentially, in order not to have each side of the street in a different ward, Main Street can't be used as a boundary for the ward. And in order not to use Main Street in the boundary and keep it in Ward 1, right? You would essentially have to move the boundary for Ward 1 south a block, which unfortunately there's not a road that runs all the way across there. And so the census blocks don't form a clean line down there either.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not saying it's not possible, but for instance, if we were to keep the current ward boundary of Ward 1, we would need to move, I mean, probably 3 further. Oh man, I'm not even sure what that would take. You'd have to move 2 into part of 1. You'd have to move 6 maybe back into the little area, one of the little areas there, but you'd have to make sure that all the math can work out. But essentially, in order to have a street not have the other side of the street in a different ward, that street can't be used as a border because the census blocks run down the center of the street because that's the way that the census draws them. And since we can't split the census blocks because we don't know how many people live where within each census block, it's kind of the most granular data we have. If you use a street as a ward boundary, then one side of the street's going to be in one ward and the other side of the street's going to be in the other. yeah, looking at Main Street, it would take some finagling.
Yeah.
But
and
yeah,
I assume that because you kind of need those straight lines here and there when you're trying to create,
yeah, that's the other
I
thing to keep
think
things.
just south of it, like if it had to be extended or something, there's it's almost like those people with the stronger voices or know how to really look at the maps are gonna speak up. So there's somebody right over the line who's saying, I'm really happy with Plan C because it orients me to who I think are my communities of interest.
Mm-hmm.
But it's very interesting to hear you talk about the borders of the wards, which is like where the comments from aldermen might really, and some of their existing knowledge of the ward. I mean, that sort of putting it all into a hopper. And I think most of the aldermen or other people in their ward who may be people that speak up a lot would know some of those issues. That, when I look at I don't really know some of the words very well. So I would only be able to imagine what that, what Michael sees in his or somebody, influential in that word. Because I just don't know them, I drive through mostly every community, but
And I think, sorry, go ahead, Barbara, I'm sorry.
I just wanted to ask maybe for the subcommittee members, if it's worth maybe trying to set a feedback deadline from the alderman on this issue to address that first component of what Josh recommended.
yeah.
And then, I don't know what's realistic. Caucus moved to the 9th, I think. So
This subcommittee has another meeting set up for January 3rd at 6:30. So if that's like maybe more of a meeting where we really take a look to comment, like really look at some.
Well, I'd like to look at, just my opinion,
Yeah, go
as a
ahead.
chair.
No, go.
By the time we get to that next meeting, if we could have one or two, not all, or even one map that we're really dealing with based on the comments that we've received. So now what we should do is really take a look at those comments that we have to date. And by the time we get to our next meeting, we really should be dwindling this down and maybe putting out, well, based on comments, this is what we have right now.
Jeff's got his hand up.
Yeah, one thing, if you do reach out to your colleagues at what they want in their districts, you might just let them know that we're working with census blocks, which might not be the most practical boundaries, but they just need to be aware that the census blocks might limit the ability to accommodate them, just so that, Broadway is a good example. We can't use Broadway as a dividing line because it isn't the boundary of a census block. Just to point it out so that no one gets to be, unrealistic.
Yeah, and to tie into that, what I was going to say is, we as the subcommittee, as well as the other people on the council, need to realize we may have these requests, but it may not be possible.
Yeah.
Like I said, Josh is going to do everything he can, but I'm even prepared to tell people, like, listen, I understand where you're coming from. We tried, but it's just not possible to do it that way.
So I have a suggestion. Rita, you would be able to put your comments down regarding your ward, right? I do it for mine. Michael, you do it for yours. And then can the three of us take on one or two of the other aldermen to really talk to them rather than wait for a response from them? Does that make any sense?
Well, I think that's what we were, I think that's what we were talking about doing is
calling them up?
having them
okay.
get involved as far as,
Okay.
are they hearing anything from their constituents?
Mm-hmm.
and then taking that feedback. But like Barbara said, let's set a deadline for it.
Right, but sometimes, an email goes to everybody.
And if they don't say anything, I mean,
I would
We
like.
can't hold their hands.
Myself,
right, you're not gonna, we may not get comments back from them, or we may not get
okay,
comments from, public members in other wards. We just may not get them. But I think that we take what we have and we work with that.
Actually, I feel like I'm channeling Carl Frankel. I actually hear two things right now. I hear that are totally compatible. One is setting a date for reporting back on some outreach or conversations, and maybe the report back is nobody got back to me. And maybe the next subcommittee meeting is the next natural time for that reporting back to occur, and that's already on the calendar. But I also hear Barbara's point of maybe it sounded like you said, we're saying that you wanted more of an assignment, like.
yeah,
Maybe
like
to say,
I've already talked to Carl. I know some of what he thinks for the city. I did start talking to Naima. We looked at 2 sets of the maps and maybe didn't go over Plan C. Or let's say Alderwoman, Naima and Alderman Carl Frankel.
So it sounds like you maybe are trying to divvy up the remaining folks?
Yeah, I think it's helpful to tell them some of what we know, because we have immersed ourselves in it more than some of the others. That's our task as a subcommittee. And, Carl was appreciative of some of what I explained to him verbally that enabled him to look at it with some different eyes and to say, oh, so it's just, at this point, because we are on a tight deadline, I could do it for 2 more aldermen, or I don't know if everybody's fine with an email, we could do that. I mean, it would be, we could put a deadline on an email and or call people.
And I think we could do both.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, I like the and.
Yeah. We do both.
I think this is a really important issue, and we need a lot more feedback before, our next meetings.
So that sounds like it both goes to the process of maybe sending an email. Maybe, because you just mentioned, we've got 3 older people here. You mentioned 2 others that have already given feedback to you. My math skills are poor.
I said a couple of.
So who's that there commenting?
I mean, then we have, you said, woman name, and Alderman Carl, right?
So it's Michelle, Steve, and Tony.
Steve, Tony.
7, 8, or 6, 8,
And
9, and Rennie. Yeah.
All right, so however you guys.
So what's that for?
I just said that my math skills were poor. I went to
Michelle,
law school.
Tony, Rennie,
And
and
Steve.
Steve.
Yeah,
Steve, that's
Steve.
4.
So maybe, I don't know if you want to divvy that up, however, but that goes to the first issue that Josh talked about, which was getting the elder member feedback. And then I know that we had since there's a deadline for this meeting, I did want to talk about the next steps for getting that broader feedback, because some of the emails that we circulated talked about, creating the flyer, and there are a couple of outstanding questions for that.
So, yeah, I think it's as soon as possible, maybe all of us aldermen, but you, Michael, and I should do it pretty quickly. There was an email that Barbara and Jonathan sent out that laid out some of the community groups. What happened? Oh, some of the community groups that we could reach out to. And, there's several I could add to that. And I think Summer Smith is back tomorrow, work with her on outreach and getting more out to organizations or groups that we may not do the outreach to.
Uh-huh.
Where you?
I mean, one of those organizations was my church.
Yeah.
That you listed. I would be happy, even if, I can stand up in my church and explain to them what's happening and tell them that we want feedback. from them. I could even have someone that knows more about it than me come in and talk to them as well. It just depends on how we want to do it.
Well, I'm wondering though, if, since we already have a report back for the next meeting, and some of the flyer creation isn't gonna be done by the subcommittee itself, since Summer has volunteered to help create that. Can maybe the report back for the next subcommittee meeting be adding additional organizations to that list? So that, you know, the flyer process and the email blast and all that can be happening.
Yeah, so we can find more community organizations. Entities.
And I just took that from, I don't know if it was the Arts Commission or the Climate Action, but some other outreach process that had come before the council, and I cut and pasted groups from there, so I'm happy to see that list
And
expand.
you can look at these and say, who has their own email distribution? Sometimes they're willing to do that, sometimes not, because it's not their core issue, but there are, you know, sometimes it's very valuable because you tap into. Okay.
Yeah.
So outreach is important and getting, you know, additional feedback from the aldermen and keep going in terms of constituents. I think it is also helpful, articles in the Freeman, because I get calls about that. You know, someone will see an article and they'll say, oh, and the more of those with, I think is helpful, alerts people to the Engage Kingston page when that link is in there. And so I think that's, yeah.
Okay, so then by the time we come back to our next meeting, regular scheduled meeting, we should have enough, I think, comments and feedback to really start working on which one of these maps is going to be the best for the city of Kingston. Right? Agreed?
Agreed.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Anything else? Barbara? Anything else?
I'm looking at our little notes earlier today. Okay, so we've set a timeline where we've tightened that up in terms of where we get our feedback.
We want to set a date now
Oh,
for,
for feedback from aldermen.
yes. So we definitely want it before our next meeting.
Right, so by the end of this week, and Friday might be a day off. Is this another 4-day weekend?
It is, Monday is a holiday.
Right, but Friday, so we need to, in the next 3 days, if we don't consider talking to people over the weekend or whatever, we should make an attempt
Because the
to,
meeting is January 3rd.
yeah, it's a Tuesday night.
All right, so why don't we set the Monday, that Monday?
Yeah,
Oh, which is,
It's a holiday.
Monday is
It's a
the holiday,
holiday.
don't set much.
so, yeah, it's hard. That's why I think a phone call, and if you leave a message within the next few days, it's legal to talk to them while they're off. I don't know. I think we just do our
All right,
best
so why
deal
don't we
with
shoot
getting
for
in
the end
touch
of this
with them.
week? We reach out tomorrow and then,
Michael, what do you
hopefully we can
think?
receive something by the end of the week.
I'm just gonna send a text message to the three of them, to Michelle, Steve, and Tony, since they're kind of my neighbors in on the map, and just say, hey, you know, have you guys gotten any feedback? Please, you know, forward it or let me know. That way we can say, yeah, we've gotten public comment and feedback from everyone.
And I'll.
To cover your bases, you just, you know your colleagues best, but just to ask them to please acknowledge this message.
Good idea.
Yeah,
So,
and I'll get ready tonight. I'll forward to him.
and I might talk to him also because of some of the
You've been
issues.
talking to him.
Any about redistricting?
No? Oh, I thought you
Not at
had,
all.
okay.
So some of the comments relate to the the border there,
Yeah,
but you have them also, so it's okay double dipping on that one.
yeah, it's fine.
I'll talk to
Let's know
Carl.
we're serious.
And do you want me to continue with Naima or?
That's fine. Guys, look, I think it's
I know, I
okay
just-
if we all, you
Right.
all, if we all, it lets them know.
Well, let's
that
not,
we
yeah,
need
but
to-
also let's not, let's try not to let somebody fall through, that we didn't talk to or something
Yeah,
or follow up
yeah.
with.
Okay,
So is there any, Tony, you're reaching out to Michael?
Yep.
Okay, Michelle?
I got Tony, Michelle, and Steve.
Okay. So, I might ask you to talk to Naima as well, because,
fine. Because Naomi, she's my neighbor.
yeah, I know.
She's right
and
on.
there's,
We actually share streets.
And it's interesting because some of these maps, it's not about incumbents. Right now, we're just trying to get input from people that know their existing situations, because some of them impact incumbents. Anyhow, interesting process to just follow the principles, get as much community feedback as possible, work with our experts, right?
And I will, after the next subcommittee meeting, we can follow up about some of the material creation and distribution. We've already talked about the flyer will be in English and Spanish. I think Summer will be back, so we can talk to her about making sure that we connect with Radio Kingston in kind of multi-language outreach. Also, the subcommittee might want to think about, once it's winnowed down to one map, creating not just the engineering size printouts downstairs, because those can be printed here in City Hall, but maybe one large map. I know the county did that for their meeting. It was kind of an easel size, so something like that map over there that people could easily see at a public meeting, and I think that would be quite helpful, especially if there's some fine tuning. I have no idea how much it would cost, but it seems like something that might be useful once we're down to one map, if there's just a really tight change, one small area.
All right, and then also, see if we can find some more other organizations to add to the current list that we have. Okay, anything else?
Nope.
Good? You have a better idea of what we're doing and where we're going?
And a reminder that comments can go to the Engage Kingston page and go to the redistricting page. And there's a contact. The email is redistricting@New York.
Kingston-NY.
Sorry. Thank you, Barbara. I had to close my eyes to try to remember it. But yeah, please get your comments in.
Yeah. All right, and then with that, I guess we can go ahead and adjourn.
Hey, see you next year.
You just like saying that, right?
I couldn't help myself.
All right. See you later.
Okay, good night, thank you guys.
Good night, guys.